And then there's Donald Trump, who had taken a 15-hour break from Twitter, reacting to his loss in Iowa. One tweet that had a lot of people puzzled, saying, "I don't believe I've been given any credit by the voters for self-funding my campaign, the only one, and I will keep doing, but not worth it." Joining me now back, Gina Loudon, Mark Serrano, and Guy Benson. Gina, I'll start with the Trump and work backwards. I thought that kind of tweet may have been aimed initially at the media. I was surprised to see him saying voters haven't given him that credit, because that's what voters have rallied around.
Well, I think, again, this is not him saying that the voters somehow aren't worth it. This is something that the more people talk about it, if I were working for Donald Trump, I would know that this is going to get him even more of a sympathy factor with his supporters, because they're going to feel like they're twisting his words. I think that you can take his tweet two ways, just like we can take so much of what Donald Trump has said from the beginning in two ways. And this has exactly been his edge in media and getting full-time media coverage from the very beginning.
You know, Guy, the notion of sympathy, rather, Ted Cruz saying that there was another, that they subsequently failed to get out the rest of the story, that's got so many people incensed. That was the #1 thing that was on my Twitter timeline today. People who like Ted Cruz starting to wonder, because this sort of thing is already germinating, and for a lot of folks, this was a turnoff.
Yeah, well, Dr. Carson was upset about this. He thought that he was wronged by Cruz. We just played the clip. I guess Cruz is apologizing to Carson's campaign. Of course, the Carson people will say, well, too little, too late. Iowa was such an important state for us. The fact of the matter is, though, Carson was already in free fall in the state of Iowa. And the fact that his campaign put out this weird, confusing statement about where Carson was going, and then later their follow-up was, no, he's going back home to Florida to get clothes, that's a very weird kind of head-scratching thing to say.
It is head-scratching, but what the Cruz camp saw all of this play out, and they could have simply said, hey, you know what, we made a mistake, the guy's going to pick up some clothes. I mean, was there a little bit of sleaze factor for Ted Cruz?
I don't know if I'd call it sleaze factor. I think if one of your opponents, from whom you want to draw supporters, puts out a vague and confusing statement about going home to Florida after Iowa and taking some time off or a vacation or whatever reason, I don't know if it's political malpractice to sort of nudge your people out there to say, hey, you know, what's he doing? This is odd. Let's exploit it. I think that was a mistake by Carson. I understand why he's upset. I get why Cruz is apologizing, but that's probably cold comfort today to Ben Carson.
You know, I looked at the cash level that Ben Carson's at right now, and it's not inconceivable a very poor showing in New Hampshire will have him sort of second-guessing this whole thing, Mark. Yeah. And if that's the case, he's something of a kingmaker. I mean, between 5 and 10%, particularly evangelicals, you know, everyone wants Ben Carson to be their friend right now.
Look, that, percentage can make a big difference for someone. If you take a look, for instance, on the Democrat side in O'Malley, what foolish timing that guy picked. He could have endorsed one of the other candidates the day before, and his 3 or 4% could have swung the difference in that race. I say the same thing about Ben Carson. He's going to have to carry it out and go through New Hampshire, but he should take a very serious look at this, about who he could support in this race for an endorsement, and give them his points, because you're right, he can make a big difference if he doesn't act too late.
All right, guys, and a Twitter battle going on even as we speak, maybe because we're talking about it. Here's a second tweet just now from Donald Trump. Because I was told I could not do well in Iowa, I spent very little time there. A fraction of Cruz and Rubio, came in a strong second. Great honor. That was earlier, but then Cruz just now responding by saying, I hardly think it was news that Donald Trump is insulting me. One would not expect my political opponents to be happy that we won Iowa yesterday. So he can have his criticism. That's fine. Gina, this is what you're talking about. I mean, listen, Iowa's behind them. They're sort of still going at it. I still would like to know more about their tax policies and more about how they're going to defeat ISIS. But is this what we're going to deal with going through New Hampshire?
I hope not. I hope that conservatives can come to their senses, because I can assure you of one thing, and that, Charles, is that the establishment is smelling blood in the water. Their goal all along has been to divide and conquer, and I think that they think effectively they did a little bit of that last night. Let's hope that we can come to our senses and realize what's at stake here and start talking about the fact that Hillary had an embarrassing night last night. The DNC is imploding. The debt is at $19 trillion, tripled under this president almost. Those are our talking points, not swinging at each other.
This is presidential politics.